I would now request our senior people sitting here, particularly Dr. Altaf.
I must compliment Mr. Zahir for publishing this book, but I should assume that he has recorded the people's narrative of what is called Kashmir history. As I always maintain, history is a two-dimensional affair, particularly in a situation like Kashmir. The dominant discourse dictated by tyrannical regimes, by the oppressor, arrogates to itself the right not only to trample on one's political, civil, economic, social and cultural rights, but also arrogates to itself the right to write your history. And this is the saddest part of Kashmir saga over the last few centuries. Every account that you find in any bookshop or in any library all over the globe, most of it is written by our oppressors. And needless to say that they have heaped all the infamous epithets on people of Kashmir. Now, once Kashmiris assume the role of writing their own account, I should hope that Mr. Zahir gives the narrative of people who have long been subjugated, who have suffered oppression successively at the hands of various oppressors. And it's very important in a situation like Kashmir that you not only relate events truthfully and recollect and record the events of people whose voices have been muffled, who have been oppressed, who have never had any representation in places where you take decisions. It is assumed that he is recorded. And it's not only one's duty as a historian in Kashmir context to record events truthfully, but it is equally important to refute distortions, to rebut distortions and to rectify it. Because as happened only last week on the banks of Nagin Lake, Kashmir history was distorted most maliciously in presence of scores and hundreds of Kashmiris, and regrettably not one Kashmiri got up and just said one sentence, "Sir, you're speaking trash, we disagree," and walked out. Now, I have read Nurani for more than 55 years. Ever since I was in 8th class, I've been reading Nurani. Highly impressed by his scholarship, highly impressed by his erudition and record keeping. But all of a sudden, he finds himself an orphan in the Indian context with the name of Abdul Ghafoor. He perhaps had hoped that he would be given a seat in Rajya Sabha, he would be honored with Padma Shri. Now, all that eluded him, again because he's Abdul Ghafoor. Now he wanted to get patronage of all Surwalas, all Chilims, all Kashyps, all Nabids on the serene banks of Nagin Lake, and he wanted to appease them. Again, at the cost of the poor Kashmiri, who is unrepresented, whose voice is muffled, and who has not recorded his story truthfully, and has never been allowed to record his truth. Now, I'm exercised about this affair of Nagin Lake business. He accuses Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah of being an obstacle in the resolution of Kashmir dispute. And one of our dailies, after very careful thought, put the headline that Jinnah jinxed Kashmir. Now, for heaven's sake, all historians will tell you that the one politician around 1947 who was upright, who was most ethical, who always said what he meant, and always meant what he said was none other than Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Muhammad Ali Jinnah could never have played this perfidy with people of Kashmir which he was accused of on the banks of Nigini. And how come Mr. Noorani, after a lapse of 65 years plus, realizes that Mr. Jinnah was the obstacle and not other dramatis personae of the tale? Now, all of us, all history books will tell you that there was no love lost between Mr. Jinnah and Lord Mountbatten. Why did Lord Mountbatten not open his mouth until his death and accuse Jinnah of having sabotaged Kashmir solution? Now, all that Mr. Jinnah said in 1947, on that fateful day of 1st November 1947, was that with Kashmir already militarized, with Kashmir already invaded, with Kashmir already occupied, and Kashmir administration in the hands of thugs, you could not have a plebiscite. Because holding a plebiscite anywhere in the world presupposes that you have conditions conducive to holding a plebiscite under impartial auspices. And Mr. Jinnah, as a very shrewd lawyer, knew that he was not going to get that plebiscite which he understood plebiscite in his very refined legal terminology. Now, having said that, another important thing is, Lord Mountbatten on that particular day was Governor General of India, and according to the British system, constitutional system, which was supposed to be prevalent in the dominion of India, Lord Mountbatten had at best an advisory role. Real power had already passed on into the hands of Indian cabinet headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Patel very willfully, very deliberately stayed away from that meeting held in Lahore on 1st of November 1947. Nehru, like a good Pandit, feigned illness and said he could not. And Sardar Patel said he wouldn't care less, so they sent Lord Mountbatten on his own. That was only an alibi to cheat not only Jinnah, not only people of Pakistan, but the hapless people of Kashmir. Now, if Mr. Noorani thinks that India was sincere in holding plebiscite, let us, for the sake of argument, accuse Mr. Jinnah of having stabbed us in the back. What prevents Government of India of holding a plebiscite now, today, in Jammu and Kashmir? Because holding a plebiscite to decide the future of any nation, it never gets outdated. So you can always have, and then let us, I will be the first man to accuse Mr. Jinnah of having sabotaged it and say, look, Indians have always meant it, and Indians have always translated their pledge into no, this was all right. Now, my idea of recounting this incident before Mr. Zahir and all the distinguished ladies and gentlemen here is that the Kashmir historian has a special peculiar responsibility on his or her shoulders. It's not only just correcting history, not only rebutting distortion, but also resisting falsehood and truth. Because writing history is part of resistance. Resistance is not only picking up a gun or picking up a stone or picking up a pen. You have to resist as a historian, you have to resist as a poet, you have to resist as a filmmaker, you have to resist as a fine arts specialist. So all these are various components of resisting evil. And I must again compliment Mr. Zahir for writing this book. I'm sure there will be disagreements, there will be criticism, but my hope is, as I said, I have not read it, my hope is that you have given adequate coverage to role of women in freedom struggle of Kashmir. I am sure you must have recorded some of the brilliant chapters that have been written. Zabruda Habib spent so many years in jail. I am sure this must be recorded here. I have not read. And so many other women, as I again say, All freedom struggles don't have prominent people only, they have nameless, faceless people, but people very dedicated to the cause. History may not record their names, but there are people whose contribution, whose sacrifices, whose dedication should be recorded. And I also request Mr. Zahir that adequate space should be given to the role of youth, which I'm sure you must have done. And with these words, I will conclude by saying that any freedom struggle that has martyrs, that has memories, that has memorials, is always on the right track, and inshallah, we will achieve our goal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Altaf Sahib. Now I would request Zahid Sahib to also speak on the idea of memory and forgetfulness. As a writer, you've been doing that, and I'm sure many of the people here are reading you. But please discuss the idea of memory and forgetfulness.
At the outset, I must compliment Zahiruddin for having brought out this book, Flashback, Kashmir Story. I am not a historian, neither trained nor by profession, but as a witness to an era, I think it's our duty to recount whatever has happened during our lifetime. Normally what happens here, whenever anybody from Delhi comes here to Srinagar, hold a seminar in the Kashmir University or takes over people outside for attending the seminar, the very first thing that they tell them is, for God's sake, forget 1947. It's past. So let's talk about the present. Let's think of the future. So here, I believe, as a student of Kashmir's contemporary political scenario, that those who tell you to forget the history, tell you to forget your cause. Unless you remember what happened yesterday. Yesterday in Shupian, a boy was killed who had distinction, who had 90% marks and had taken to the gun. Today, as on date, it is history. So we cannot think of any struggle without remembering our past. But I feel that unless we know our people, the people who have put their life in the struggle of our struggle, we must remember them. How many of us know who are the people, your own first people who died in custody? How many of us? The custodial death has not happened just yesterday. It is the past. When we see the struggle of the 1856, we see people like Kudulala. We see many people who were taken from here to Jammu and there they died. If you remember them, you remember your struggle, you remember your roots. If you forget them, see, you are always asked to forget. Those who are dominating you or who have occupied you, they will tell you to forget, they will drag you towards the issues which are maybe of bread and butter to us, but they will always ask you to forget 1947, to forget 1931. It's our job to pass on those anecdotes, to pass on that part of our history to our younger generation, to give sustenance to our movement. Many of us know that the armed struggle here started in what? 1990? If I tell you it's in 1931, right in 1931, none other than Mirwais Yusuf Shah asked the people to gather at Khaniar, near the Kisra shrine, with whatever equipment they had, armored, even the mystic sand, that is Shalmar from Miraksha came with an open sword in his hand. You are told that the mystics do not believe in the armed struggle. But he came. You see, it is recorded in our history, not in the history of ours, the history that we are taught, but history that was written on the other side of the Venice, on the other side of the LOC. In all those histories, those anecdotes are written that Mira Shah Sahib, a mystic saint, along with his 15,000 devotees, came to Khania with armored with birches, arches with North, and that's known as North Brigade. In history, it has known as North Brigade. So we must all remember these things. The importance of martyrs. The importance of martyrs is as eminent. I think, fortunately or unfortunately, I think fortunately, my tomorrow's column is also on the same thing. The importance of narrative and meta-narrative in the freedom struggles. Unless you have a narrative, you have no cause to fight. You must, how does the narrative is formed? The narrative is your tale, the tale of your heroes, the tale of Afzal Guru, the tale of Muhammad Masud Bhat, the tale of thousands of people who have sacrificed their life. That is your narrative. That narrative gives a cause. In the world's modern political theories, the narrative is thought to be, if you have a very strong narrative, it is thought as an important tool in the conflict management, in the conflict resolution. Narratives are not just, if I say 47, my friends tell me that you are too obsessed with 1947. If I don't talk about 1947, what cause I have? If I don't talk about the UN resolutions, what cause I have? If I don't talk about the people who have struggled here, the people who were pushed across, if I don't talk about Muhammad Yusuf Baz, if I don't talk about the people like Aga Sabu's brother, Aga Shaukat Ali, if I don't talk about Ghani, the barrister Ghani, who were young people thrown out for having a conviction, a political conviction. If I don't talk about them, how do I have a cause? Then I don't have a cause at all. So it's very important always to remember your story, to remember your people, to remember your heroes. And it is, I think, the duty of every one of us. Those God has gifted you a pen, or God has gifted you a pen, you must memorize those people. And you should not allow your narrative to be overshadowed by the sub-narratives. The sub-narratives are there, but they should not be allowed to dominate your narrative. That is how a dominant discourse is formed. A dominant discourse is meant to defeat your national narrative, is to defeat your meta-narrative, is to defeat the Kashmir narrative. With these words, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zahid sir. We wanted you to speak about the importance and significance of building narratives for sustaining the movement, and you exactly said what I wanted you to. Thank you very much.